A veteran haunted by war nightmares, a heliport wrapped in cold lights, an infamous executive who hides more scars than numbers in her reports. What happened on that golden late afternoon when she forced him back into the cockpit to save the company's biggest contract was not just a test of skill. It was the activation of an old plan built on a covered-up crash, million-dollar insurance policies, and guilty people who never paid. A plan that would have remained untouchable if, mid-flight, an unexpected choice between obeying and saving had not turned everything upside down. This is the story of how a helicopter in the air became the stage where guilt, love, and destiny collided and created a new family amid the wreckage. When the janitor took the controls, the downtown Manhattan heliport sat at Pier 6 on the East River, a concrete platform jutting into the water in the heart of the financial district. At 5:47 in the morning, the air carried the smell of jet fuel and salt water, and the only sound was the soft squeak of a mop against polished concrete. A thin mist rose from the river, blurring the skyline of Brooklyn across the water into a watercolor of steel and glass. Noah Carter moved in slow, deliberate strokes, his calloused hands wrapped around the wooden handle like it was something precious. He was 41 years old, broad-shouldered but thin in a way that spoke of skipped meals and long hours. His gray coveralls bore the embroidered name No A.H. above his heart. The letters faded from countless washes, the fabric worn soft at the elbows and knees. His eyes, the color of weathered steel, traced the silhouette of the Bell 429 helicopter resting on its landing skids, the way a man might look at a former lover, with longing and grief braided together so tightly neither could be separated. He paused, just for a moment, and something flickered across his face, a shadow of memory. There and gone like a bird passing before the sun, his fingers tightened on the mop handle. His breath caught in his chest. He had not flown in 4 years. 4 years since the desert. 4 years since the smoke and the screaming metal. 4 years since he held her hand and felt it go still. Above him, in the gleaming glass towers of Lower Manhattan, were Halle Aviation, the subsidiary aviation firm of the aerospace giant Aeronova, occupied 3 floors of a financial district skyscraper. The world was preparing to spin at its usual breakneck speed. Contracts worth hundreds of millions. Clients who measured time in seconds. And at the top of it all, a woman who had learned long ago that softness was a luxury she could not afford. Victoria Halle arrived at 6:15, her heels clicking against marble with the precision of a metronome. She was 36, with dark hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the angles of her face even sharper. Her charcoal suit was immaculate, tailored to emphasize authority rather than femininity, and her posture was so rigid it looked like her spine had been replaced with steel. Her eyes pale green, almost translucent, swept over every detail with the efficiency of a laser, cataloging imperfections, inefficiencies, weaknesses. She did not greet the security guard who held the door. She did not smile at her assistant, Marcus Chun, who hurried to match her pace with a tablet clutched to his chest like a shield. She did not notice the janitor at the heliport 40 stories below, who was watching the sunrise over Brooklyn and remembering a woman who had loved the sky as much as he did. "Status on the Whitmore demonstration," Victoria said. It was not a question. It was a command wrapped in syllables. Marcus swallowed. He was 28, eager to prove himself and perpetually terrified of disappointing her. Pilot confirmed, helicopter fueled, weather is clear until noon. Mr. Whitmore's team lands at 9. He hesitated, and that hesitation was a crack in the dam. There's one issue. Victoria stopped walking. The air around her seemed to freeze. 2 junior executives, approaching from the elevator, saw her expression and immediately reversed direction. Define issue. Captain Torres. He was in a car accident last night. Broken collarbone, possible concussion. He's out for at least 6 weeks. For 3 full seconds, Victoria said nothing. The silence was so complete that Marcus could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above them. Then her jaw tightened, a muscle flickering beneath the skin, and she resumed walking faster now, her heels striking the floor like small, controlled explosions. Find me another pilot. I've contacted every certified 429 pilot in the tri-state area. Manhattan, Newark, Long Island. None are available on this notice. The demonstration is in 3 hours, and the FAA requirements for... I'm aware of the FAA requirements, Marcus. Victoria reached her office door and turned. Her eyes were cold, but behind them, something burned, a desperation she would never admit to, not even to herself. This demonstration is worth $94 million. It is the reason Hyperion Systems is even considering us for their executive fleet contract. Richard Whitmore wants to see his new Hudson Yards campus from the air. He wants to feel the power and precision of our aircraft. If we do not fly him over that campus today, we lose the deal. She paused, letting the words sink in. We lose the deal, we lose the quarter. We lose the quarter. My father calls a board meeting and reminds everyone, including me, that I have failed to prove I deserve this position. That I am, as he has always suspected, not strong enough to lead. She opened the door. Find me a pilot. At the heliport, Noah emptied his mop bucket into the drain and checked his watch, a battered Casio with a cracked face, a gift from Leo on Father's Day 2 years ago. The band was held together with electrical tape. He had 45 minutes before his next assignment, the executive offices on the 38th floor. Enough time to eat the granola bar in his pocket and call his son. He leaned against the railing, the Manhattan skyline rising behind him like a mountain range of glass and steel, the Brooklyn Bridge visible in the distance, and pulled out a phone so old it still had physical buttons. The screen was scratched. The battery barely held a charge, but it worked. That was all that mattered. He pressed the first speed dial and waited. Dad? The voice was small, still thick with sleep, and it broke Noah's heart in the best possible way. Hey, little pilot. Just wanted to hear your voice before school. Did you see the helicopters yet? Noah glanced at the Bell 429, sleek, powerful, painted in Halle Aviation's signature midnight blue with a gold stripe along the tail boom. Beyond it, the East River flowed dark and silent, carrying the first light of dawn. It was beautiful. It was everything he had lost. I'm looking at one right now. Is it the blue one? The one with the gold stripe? That's the one. I drew a picture of it, Mrs. Patterson said the proportions were wrong. But I told her you said real helicopters don't always look like the ones in books. She said I was being argumentative. I said I was being accurate. Noah smiled, and for a moment, the lines around his eyes softened. Leo was 7 years old, brilliant and stubborn, and so much like his mother, it sometimes took Noah's breath away. You tell Mrs. Patterson she can come down to the heliport and measure it herself. You did good, Leo. Dad? Yeah? A pause. The kind of pause that holds weight. Are you gonna fly again someday? The question hung in the cold morning air like a held breath. Noah closed his eyes. He could feel the phantom weight of the cyclic in his right hand, the collective in his left. He could hear the whine of the turbines, the thrum of the rotors, the voice of his co-pilot, his wife calling out altitude and airspeed in that calm, steady tone that had always made him feel invincible. Until the day it hadn't. I don't know, buddy. Maybe. Someday. Okay. Leo's voice was small but accepting. He had learned not to push. I love you, Dad. I love you too. More than the whole sky. He ended the call and stood there, his hand pressed against the railing, his knuckles white. The helicopter gleamed in the rising sun, beautiful and patient, waiting for someone who remembered how to make it sing. Noah remembered. He just didn't know if he had the courage to try. Victoria stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her office, watching lower Manhattan wake beneath her. Her reflection stared back sharp, composed, untouchable. Behind that glass mask, her mind raced through contingencies, backup plans, damage control scenarios. Charter a helicopter from a competitor? Impossible. They would sense weakness and exploit it. Postpone the demonstration? Whitmore was flying to London tomorrow. There was no second chance. Cancel entirely? The thought made her stomach clench. Her father would hear about it within the hour. He always heard about her failures. Ma'am? Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face pale but determined. Tell me you found someone. I may have found an option, but you're not going to like it. I don't like anything before 7 in the morning, Marcus. Speak. He swallowed, clutched his tablet tighter, and spoke. The janitor. The one who cleans the heliport. His name is Noah Carter. I pulled his personnel file on a hunch because, well, he always seems to know a lot about the helicopters when maintenance asks questions. He identified a hydraulic leak last month that our own mechanics had missed. I thought it was strange for a janitor, so I dug deeper. Victoria raised an eyebrow. And? Ma'am, he's a former Army pilot. Chief Warrant Officer 4. Over 3,000 flight hours in combat rotorcraft, Blackhawks, Chinooks, Apaches. He flew with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. The Night Stalkers. Marcus paused. He's rated on the Bell 429. Victoria turned slowly, her expression unreadable. You're telling me my heliport janitor is a decorated military aviator? Apparently, yes. He left the Army 4 years ago. Took the janitorial position here 18 months ago. No disciplinary issues. No complaints. His performance reviews are excellent. Always on time. Always thorough. Marcus hesitated. He just cleans. Victoria was silent for a long moment. Her mind was already calculating risk versus reward, probability versus desperation. Then she laughed a short, sharp sound that held no warmth. Bring him to me. Noah stood in the doorway of the executive office, his mop and bucket left in the hallway, his coveralls still damp at the knees from mopping the 41st floor. He had never been on this floor before. The carpet was so thick it seemed to swallow sound, and the air smelled of leather and expensive coffee and something else, something cold and artificial like recycled ambition. Through the window behind Victoria's desk, he could see the One World Trade Center rising into the morning sky, and beyond it, the Statue of Liberty, small and distant in the harbor. Victoria sat behind a desk the size of a small aircraft, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on him like a hawk studying a mouse it hadn't yet decided to kill. Mr. Carter, ma'am. I understand you were a pilot. Noah's expression did not change. His face was a wall, built brick by brick over 4 years of grief. I was. You're rated on the Bell 429. I am. Then why are you mopping my heliport instead of flying my helicopters? The question was delivered like a scalpel, precise and cold, designed to cut through pretense and reach bone. Noah met her gaze without flinching. He had faced enemy fire, sandstorms, mechanical failures at 5,000 feet. He could face a CEO in a tailored suit. With respect, ma'am, that's not something I discuss. Victoria leaned forward, her elbows on the desk, her fingers interlaced. I have a $94 million contract riding on a demonstration flight in, she checked her watch, a slim Cartier that cost more than Noah made in a year, 2 hours and 14 minutes. My pilot is in the hospital. You are, apparently, qualified to fly the aircraft in question. I am offering you a chance to do exactly that. No. The word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples across the polished surface of Victoria's composure. She blinked. Excuse me? I said no. I don't fly anymore. Everyone flies for the right price, Mr. Carter. Something shifted in Noah's eyes, something old and wounded, something that had never fully healed and never would. Not everyone, and not me. He turned to leave. Wait. Victoria's voice was different now. Not softer, exactly, but stripped of its edge, stripped of the armor she wore like a second skin. She stood, walked around the desk, and stopped a few feet from him. Up close, she could see the gray at his temples, the calluses on his hands, the quiet strength in his posture. Tell me why. Noah paused, his hand on the doorframe. The wood was cool beneath his fingers. For a long moment, he said nothing. The only sound was the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. Then, quietly, in a voice that carried the weight of 4 years of silence, I was flying a medevac mission. Kandahar Province. We got the call at 0300 American soldiers hit by an IED, multiple casualties, critical condition. My co-pilot was my wife, Sarah. He paused. The name still hurt to say. We took fire on approach, RPG. I tried to autoritate, tried to get us down, but the tail rotor was gone. We hit hard. He stopped, breathed, continued. I got us down, but she didn't make it. I held her in the wreckage for 47 minutes before rescue arrived. I watched the light go out of her eyes. He looked at Victoria, and for the first time, she saw the depth of his pain, a canyon carved by grief, still raw at the edges. I haven't touched the controls since. The office was silent. Victoria's composure cracked, just a fracture, just for a second. She thought of her mother, dying slowly in a hospital bed while her father negotiated contracts in the next room. She thought of the wall she had built around her own heart, brick by brick, year by year. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. Noah looked at her. So am I every day. He started to walk away again. Then he stopped. You said 94 million. Yes. How many jobs does that contract represent? Victoria hesitated, caught off guard by the question. Directly? About 300. Indirectly, another 2,000 in the supply chain. Manufacturing, maintenance, logistics. Noah closed his eyes. 300 people. 300 families. 300 children who needed their parents to have stable jobs, steady incomes, futures worth believing in. He thought of Leo, of the tiny apartment they shared in Queens with its water-stained ceiling and rattling radiator, of the drawing of a helicopter with imperfect proportions taped to the refrigerator, of all the nights he had woken up gasping, reaching for a hand that was no longer there. If I do this, he said slowly, turning back to face her, I want something in return. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Name it. My son was to go to aviation camp this summer, the one at Teterboro Airport. 3 weeks, full immersion ground school, simulator time, flight principles. I can't afford the tuition. Done. I'm not finished. Noah stepped closer, and for the first time, Victoria noticed that he was taller than her, even in her heels. I also want your word, your personal word, that if something goes wrong up there, if I freeze, if I can't do it, you won't punish me. You won't fire me. You'll let me go back to my mop and my bucket and my life, no questions asked. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. You have my word, Mr. Carter. Noah shook it. Her grip was firm, practiced, but her fingers were cold. One more thing, Victoria said, and a flicker of dark amusement crossed her face. The first hint of humanity he had seen in her. The CFO's wife once joked that I would marry the janitor before I ever let a deal fall through. I believe my exact response was that I would marry anyone who could fly a helicopter better than my ex-fiancé. He was a trust fund pilot. All ego, no skill. Noah's eyebrow rose. Is that a proposal? It's a promise. Fly this demonstration perfectly, and I'll consider it. For the first time in 4 years, Noah Carter almost smiled. If you believe that courage can be found in the most unexpected places, and that second chances are worth fighting for, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps us share more stories of redemption and hope. The next 90 minutes were a blur of pre-flight checklists, fuel readings, weather briefings, and the particular silence that falls over a person preparing to confront their deepest fear. Noah sat in the cockpit of the Bell 429, his hands resting on his thighs, his eyes tracing the familiar layout of instruments and controls. Everything was where he remembered. The cyclic stick between his knees, the collective lever at his left side, the anti-torque pedals beneath his feet. The glass panel displays glowing with soft blue light showing engine parameters, fuel levels, navigation data. He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I have to do this." In his mind, he heard her voice, the voice he still dreamed about, still reached for in the dark hours before dawn. The voice that had talked him through 100 missions, 1,000 emergencies, a lifetime of shared skies. "Then do it, flyboy. Fly for me. Fly for Leo. Fly for yourself." He opened his eyes, took a breath, and began the startup sequence. At 8:58 a.m., a Blacktown car pulled onto the heliport access road. Richard Whitmore emerged silver-haired, immaculately dressed, with the confident bearing of a man who had built a tech empire from a garage in Silicon Valley and now commanded a workforce of 30,000. Behind him came a team of executives, analysts, and lawyers, all of them watching the helicopter with appraising eyes, calculating its worth in dollars and efficiency. Victoria greeted him at the entrance to the heliport terminal, her smile precise and professional, her handshake firm. "Mr. Whitmore, welcome to Hawley Aviation." "Ms. Hawley." Whitmore had the voice of a man accustomed to being listened to. "I've heard impressive things about your operation. I hope today's demonstration lives up to the hype." "It will." Victoria's voice did not waver, though internally she was holding her breath. "Allow me to introduce your pilot." Noah stepped out of the cockpit. He had changed into a flight suit borrowed from the maintenance locker, slightly too large across the shoulders, but he wore it with an ease that spoke of years of muscle memory. His gray eyes met Whitmore's. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm Noah Carter. I'll be flying you today." Whitmore studied him for a moment, the way a man studies an investment before committing. Then his expression shifted, recognition perhaps, or respect. "Military?" 12 years, sir." 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Night Stalkers. Whitmore nodded slowly. "My nephew flew with them in Afghanistan. Kandahar 2011, came home in a box." He extended his hand. "It's an honor to meet someone who served." Noah shook it. "The honor is mine, sir." The Bell 429 lifted off at 9:07 a.m. Victoria watched from the heliport observation deck, her arms crossed, her breath held. Marcus stood beside her, clutching his tablet like a lifeline, refreshing the weather report every 30 seconds, even though the sky was perfectly clear. "He's steady," Marcus murmured. Victoria said nothing. She was watching Noah's hands through the cockpit glass shore, fluid, moving with a precision that seemed almost unconscious, like a pianist returning to a familiar sonata. The helicopter rose smoothly, tilted, and swept out over the East River, the Manhattan skyline glittering in the morning sun like a crown of glass and steel. In the cabin, Richard Whitmore gazed out the window as they climbed along the river. Below, the Brooklyn Bridge stretched across the water, cars and pedestrians moving like ants. The Statue of Liberty stood in the harbor, her torch catching the light. Noah narrated the flight path with quiet professionalism, pointing out landmarks, adjusting altitude to give the best views, anticipating Whitmore's questions before they were asked. "We'll follow the East River north, then swing west over Midtown to give you a clear view of your Hudson Yards campus from every angle," Noah said. his voice calm and steady through the intercom. But inside, behind the calm exterior, Noah was fighting a war. Every gust of wind brought a flash of memory, the desert heat, the smell of burning fuel, the screech of metal tearing apart. Every shift in the controls echoed with the phantom weight of Sarah's hands beside his, her voice calling out altitude and airspeed, her calm presence that had always made him feel like nothing could go wrong. Twice, his vision blurred. Twice, his hands trembled on the cyclic. Twice, he forced himself to breathe, to focus, to remember why he was here. For Leo. For 300 families. For Sarah. They passed over the United Nations building, the Empire State Building rising to the west, and then swung toward Hudson Yards. The gleaming towers of Hyperion Systems' new campus spread out below them, a complex of glass and steel that would soon house 5,000 employees. At 9:42 a.m., as they circled back toward the heliport, the Manhattan skyline framed in the windscreen like a postcard, Richard Whitmore leaned forward. "Carter, I have to ask, why did you leave the Army?" Noah's grip tightened on the cyclic, the question he had been dreading. "I lost my co-pilot, sir, my wife. We were flying medevac together, Kandahar province. She didn't make it." Whitmore was silent for a moment. Then he placed a hand on Noah's shoulder, a simple gesture, heavy with understanding. "I lost my son in Iraq 16 years ago. IED in Fallujah. He was 23. His voice was steady, but beneath it lay the same canyon of grief that Noah carried. "It never stops hurting, does it?" "No, sir, it doesn't." "But you're flying again." Noah looked at the horizon, where the sun was climbing over Queens, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The same sky he had loved since he was Leo's age. The same sky that had taken everything from him and given him everything, too. "Today, sir, for the first time in 4 years." Whitmore nodded slowly, his eyes on the approaching heliport. "Then I'd say you've already succeeded." The landing was flawless. The helicopter touched down with barely a shiver, its skids settling onto the helipad like a whisper. Noah powered down the engines, removed his headset, and sat for a moment in the sudden silence, his hands trembling against his thighs. He had done it. He had flown again. Outside, Victoria was striding toward the aircraft, her face unreadable but her pace urgent. Richard Whitmore climbed out, straightened his jacket, and turned to face her with a smile that was worth $94 million. "Miss Hawley, I came here expecting a sales pitch. Polished executives, rehearsed talking points, a demonstration designed to impress." He shook his head. "Instead, you gave me a pilot who understands what it means to serve, to sacrifice, and to keep going even when the world has taken everything from him." He extended his hand. "You have your contract." Victoria's composure cracked. For just a second, just long enough to be human, her eyes glistened. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. Thank your janitor." Whitmore glanced back at Noah, who was still sitting in the cockpit, staring at the controls like he was seeing them for the first time. "That man is the reason I'm signing. His story, his courage, his willingness to face his demons for something larger than himself. That's the kind of person I want to do business with. That's the kind of person I want representing my fleet." He turned back to Victoria. "Offer him a job, a real one. Chief demonstration pilot, whatever you want to call it. If he says no, respect it, but make the offer." Victoria nodded. "I will." That evening, Victoria found Noah at the heliport again. The sun was sinking behind the towers of lower Manhattan, turning the East River into a ribbon of molten gold. Brooklyn glowed across the water, and the Statue of Liberty was a dark silhouette against the orange sky. Noah was sitting on an overturned crate at the edge of the pier, his coveralls back on, his mop and bucket standing nearby like old friends waiting to resume their duties. "You saved the deal," Victoria said, stopping a few feet away. "You saved 300 jobs." Noah did not look at her. His eyes were on the horizon, on the fading light, on something she couldn't see. "That's what matters." Victoria hesitated. Then she walked over and sat down on a crate beside him. The concrete was cold through her suit, but she didn't move. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was different now, not uncomfortable, but full. "I looked up your service record," Victoria finally said. 3 bronze stars, 2 distinguished flying crosses, a silver star for valor under fire. You were nominated for the Medal of Honor. I didn't accept it. Why? Because the mission that earned it is the mission where Sarah died. His voice was quiet, steady, stripped of pretense. They wanted to give me a medal for the worst day of my life. For failing to save her, I couldn't do it. Victoria was silent. She thought of her mother again, the way she had wasted away in that hospital bed while Victoria sat beside her, helpless, watching the machines beep and the numbers drop. The way her father had handled grief by refusing to acknowledge it, burying himself in work, teaching Victoria that emotions were weaknesses to be managed, not felt. "I understand," she said softly, and she did. Noah looked at her for the first time since she sat down. Really looked at her past the tailored suit and the rigid posture and the armor she wore like a second skin. "Do you? My mother died when I was 16. Ovarian cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. My father buried himself in work in Aeronova, in the company, in anything that would keep him from having to feel." She paused. He expected me to do the same, to be strong, to be cold, to never let anyone see me crack. She looked across the river at the way the light painted the water in shades of fire and gold. "I've spent 20 years trying to prove I'm worthy of his legacy. 20 years being exactly what he wanted, ruthless, efficient, untouchable. And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to feel anything at all." She turned to Noah. "Until today. When I watched you face your greatest fear to save a contract that wasn't even yours to save, a contract for a company you own nothing to, for a woman who has never given you a reason to help her." Noah was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You gave me a reason." "What?" "You asked me why. In your office, when I said no, you asked me why. You didn't demand. You didn't threaten. You asked." He shook his head. "No one has asked me about Sarah in 4 years. Everyone tiptoes around it, pretends it didn't happen, treats me like I'm made of glass. You asked me to tell you the truth." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a loosening, like a knot slowly coming undone. "You owe me dinner," she said. Noah's eyebrow rose. "I thought I owed you a marriage proposal." She smiled a real smile, fragile and unexpected, like a flower pushing through concrete. "Let's start with dinner." 3 weeks later, Noah stood at the edge of Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, watching Leo run toward a row of training helicopters with a kind of pure, unbridled joy that only a 7-year-old can produce. The morning sun was bright. The air smelled of grass and jet fuel, and the Manhattan skyline was visible in the distance across the Hudson River. "Dad! Dad, they said I can sit in the cockpit." "Go ahead, little pilot." "I'll be right here." Victoria appeared beside him, 2 cups of coffee in her hands, her hair down for the first time he had ever seen softer, more human. "He looks happy." "He is." Noah accepted the coffee, their fingers brushing. "Thank you for making this possible." "You made it possible. I just wrote a check." Noah shook his head. "You did more than that. You gave me a reason to fly again. You gave Leo his dream." "You," he stopped, searching for the words. "You reminded me that the sky isn't just about what I lost. It's about what I can still give." Victoria looked at him. The ice in her eyes had thawed slowly. Over the past 3 weeks' dinners that stretched into late nights, conversations that peeled back layers she had hidden for decades, moments where she forgot to be the CEO and simply became Victoria. "I've been thinking," she said. About what? About the company. About my father. About what I actually want. She paused, watching Leo climb into the cockpit of a training helicopter, his face pressed against the glass. My father wants me to be ruthless, to prioritize profit over people. To become him. She met Noah's gaze. But watching you these past weeks, the way you treat Leo, the way you treat everyone, the way you give even when you have nothing, I've realized something. What's that? I don't want to be ruthless. I want to be brave, like you. Noah reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were warm now. You already are. 6 months passed and the world kept turning, but differently now for all of them. Halle Aviation won 3 more major contracts. Victoria restructured the company's employee benefits program, prioritizing mental health support and family leave. Her father called it sentimental nonsense. She called it the future. The board voted in her favor. Noah returned to flying not full-time, but enough to matter. He became the company's chief demonstration pilot, the one they called when a deal needed the human touch, when a client needed to see not just competence but character. He still cleaned the heliport every morning before dawn because it was where he felt closest to Sarah and because it reminded him of where he came from. And Leo thrived. He finished aviation camp with top marks, started a model helicopter club at his school, and began calling Victoria Miss Vic with the easy affection of a child who knows he is loved. On a crisp October evening, 6 months to the day after the Whitmore demonstration, Noah led Victoria and Leo to the downtown Manhattan heliport. The sun was setting over New Jersey, painting the Hudson River in shades of gold and rose, and the air smelled of autumn and possibility. "Why are we down here?" Leo asked, his small hand wrapped around Victoria's. "Because this is where everything changed," Noah said. He knelt down, taking Leo's hand and looking up at Victoria. The wind tugged at her hair. The Manhattan skyline glittered behind them. 6 months ago, I was mopping this heliport, trying to forget how to fly. I thought my life was over. I thought the sky had taken everything from me, my wife, my purpose, my reason to keep going. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. And then I met a woman who challenged me to face my fear, who saw something in me I thought was gone forever, and who showed me that second chances are real. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, a slender band of white gold with a small, perfect diamond that caught the fading light. "Victoria Halle, you promised you'd marry me if I could fly better than your ex-fiancé. I don't know how good he was, but I'm hoping I've earned the chance." Victoria's eyes were shining, not with the cold precision he had seen the first day, but with something warmer, something true. "You flew circles around him," she whispered. "Then will you marry me? Will you become part of our family, mine and Leo's, and let us become part of yours?" Leo tugged her hand eagerly. "Say yes, Miss Vic, then we can all fly together." Victoria laughed a real laugh, full and unguarded, like a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Yes," she said. "Yes to both of you." Noah slid the ring onto her finger, rose, and pulled her into an embrace. Leo wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a moment, the three of them stood together on the heliport, wrapped in the golden light of the setting sun, the Manhattan skyline rising behind them like a promise. A new family. A second chance. A future worth believing in. 1 year later, Noah stood before a crowd of 500 at the Metropolitan Aviation Gala at the Plaza Hotel, accepting the Distinguished Civilian Aviator Award for his work in veteran mental health advocacy and helicopter safety training. The ballroom was filled with pilots, executives, military officers, and dignitaries, but Noah's eyes found only 2 faces in the crowd. Victoria, in the front row, her hand resting on her stomach, 3 months pregnant now, their first child together. And Leo, beside her, wearing a miniature suit and tie that made him look like a tiny Wall Street executive, beaming with pride. 4 years ago, Noah said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, I believed I would never fly again. I believed I had lost everything that mattered, my wife, my purpose, my reason to face the sky. I was mopping a heliport in lower Manhattan, trying to disappear into the rhythm of work, trying to forget. He paused. And then a woman with ice in her eyes and fire in her heart gave me a challenge I couldn't refuse and a reason to face my fear. He looked at Victoria. I've learned that second chances don't come from nowhere. They come from people who believe in us when we've stopped believing in ourselves. They come from small acts of courage, the courage to show up, to ask for help, to let someone in, to be vulnerable when everything in you says to stay closed. He paused. And they come from love. The love of a child who never stopped believing his father would fly again. The love of a woman who saw past the coveralls and the mop bucket to the person underneath. The love of a family that isn't defined by blood, but by choice. He raised his award. This is for Sarah, who taught me how to fly. For Leo, who taught me why. And for Victoria, who taught me that it's never too late to begin again. The crowd rose to its feet. In the back of the room, an older man in a tailored suit watched with an unreadable expression. Harrison Hawley, Victoria's father, had opposed the marriage. He had called Noah a liability, a distraction, a stain on the family name. He had threatened to remove Victoria from the company. But as he watched his daughter wipe tears from her eyes, as he saw the way she looked at Noah with a warmth he had not seen in her since her mother's death, something in him shifted. Something cracked. He did not approach them that night. But 3 days later, a package arrived at Noah and Victoria's apartment in Battery Park City. Inside was a vintage pilot's watch, a bridling Navitimer, Harrison's own from his early days as a naval aviator, and a note in his careful handwriting, "You were right. People before profit. I should have learned that 40 years ago. Welcome to the family." On a rainy Sunday morning, 2 years after the proposal, Noah stood at the downtown Manhattan heliport, mop in hand, just as he had 1,000 times before. But everything was different now. Leo was inside the terminal building, doing his homework in the pilot's lounge before their afternoon flight lesson. Victoria was at the office, preparing for a board meeting where she would announce a new veterans, hiring Initiative 100 positions reserved for former military personnel transitioning to civilian careers. And in the nursery of their Battery Park apartment, their daughter, Sarah Rose Carter, was sleeping in a crib decorated with tiny helicopters. Noah set down the mop and leaned against the railing, looking out at the river and the city he had learned to love again. The rain was easing now, the clouds beginning to part over Brooklyn, revealing patches of blue. "Hey, Sarah," he said softly. "I'm still flying, still getting up every morning, still teaching Leo about the sky." He smiled. "You'd like Victoria. She's stubborn as hell, just like you. And she loves Leo like he's her own. And our daughter, our little Sarah Rose, she's got your eyes." He paused. "I used to think losing you meant losing everything. I thought I'd never fly again, never love again, never feel whole again. But I was wrong. You gave me Leo. You gave me the courage to keep going. And somehow, through all the pain and the fear and the doubt, you led me to a new family, to a new purpose, to a new sky." He looked up, where a break in the clouds let a single shaft of sunlight through, illuminating the heliport and the Manhattan skyline beyond like a spotlight. "I'll never forget you. But I finally learned how to live again." He picked up the mop and continued cleaning. Some rituals, he had learned, were not about the task itself. They were about remembering where you came from and being grateful for where you are. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that redemption is possible and that love can find us in the most unexpected places, take a moment to share, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that prove the human spirit can heal, hope, and fly again. That afternoon, as the rain cleared and the sun broke through, Noah, Victoria, and Leo climbed into the Bell 429 together. Baby Sarah was safe at home with her grandmother Harrison's wife, who had insisted on babysitting after deciding, in her own quiet way, that family meant more than old grievances. "Ready, little pilot?" Noah asked. Leo grinned, his head set slightly too big for his head. "Ready, Captain Dad." Victoria squeezed Noah's hand. "Ready, Captain Husband." Noah smiled a real smile, full and unbroken, the kind of smile he had thought he would never wear again. "Then let's fly." The helicopter lifted off, rising above Lower Manhattan, above the East River, above the weight of the past. Below, the heliport at Pier 6 shrank to a tiny gray square, the place where a janitor had once mopped in silence, dreaming of skies he thought he would never touch again. Now he was touching them. And he was not alone. The three of them flew up the Hudson River, past Midtown, past the George Washington Bridge, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind them like a city of dreams. A new family forged from loss and courage and the stubborn belief that second chances are real, if only we are brave enough to reach for them. Above the clouds, the world was endless, and so was hope. Sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is not to fly through a storm, but to land, to grieve, to heal, and then to take off again. Noah Carter learned that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to love, to trust, and to fly again, even when the sky has taken everything from you. And in the end, he found something he thought was lost forever: a family, a purpose, and a home.